Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. I am, of course, as always, your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for joining me today. If you ever need more information about Geek Therapy Radio, just go to geektherapyradio.com. You can also search for Geek Therapy Radio on your favorite podcast app by searching for Geek Therapy Radio. Just look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and that's me. All right, so on the show today, we have friend of the show, Dave. He is a Kiwi. He said I could say that. A New Zealander who lives in Japan and teaches English. So we have the most fun conversation about all the cool stuff that's going on in Japan, all the cool retro gear and video games and all sorts of cool things that you can find in Japan. So without further ado, let's just dive right into the conversation. Dave, you said you worked in radio?
Yes, I worked as a high schooler at a local radio station where I grew up in New Zealand, and then I went to radio school and proceeded to fail out.
Okay.
Yeah, well, for me, that's how I ended up here in Japan, actually. I went, I guess I can't do radio. What was I good at school? I'd studied Japanese for 5 years because New Zealand high school is 5 years.
Yeah.
And then I went, I was pretty good at Japanese, and then did a 4-year degree at a university in New Zealand. And ended up in Japan on a Japanese government-run program called the JET program, JET. And here I am.
Here in Texas, grades 9 through 12, so 9, 10, 11, 12, that's 4 years of high school. And then middle school is 6, 7, wait, what is it? What is middle school? I think 6, 7, 8? 3 years of middle school, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of elementary school. It's broken up into weird chunks. It depends on the region of the country. So how is it broken up in New Zealand?
Well, in New Zealand, you go to school the day after your 5th birthday, like the day after you start school.
Okay.
So your first year can be longer or shorter depending on when you start. So there are 13 years total. Okay. So you do 6 elementary primary school. You do 2 middle school or intermediate school, and then 5 high school to make up the 13.
Okay. I'm just trying to wrap my head. It's very fascinating to me to hear how they do things in other parts of the world.
Sorry. The other thing that really weirded me out is the school year in New Zealand is actually a school year because we're in the Southern Hemisphere. Our summer break happens at the end of the year in December, January, February. So we have Christmas and everything in that gap. So our school year is February till December.
That's something always that warps my brain a little bit. Southern Hemisphere. That means, Christmas is technically in the summertime in the Southern Hemisphere. So it's funny to me. It was always funny growing up. The traditional kind of, I guess you'd call Northern American Christmas scene with all the snow and the Christmas trees and the winter wonderland. Do you get a lot of that imagery in the Southern Hemisphere?
Well, because we're an English-speaking country, a lot of our TV shows and things would come from America and the UK and things. Yeah. So you'll be sitting watching a Christmas special with a snowman ice skating on a frozen pond while you're sitting in shorts and a T-shirt when it's 30 degrees outside.
Yeah, it's 37 degrees.
30 Celsius, sorry. So I don't know what that'd be in Fahrenheit.
No, I completely, and listeners of the show, we completely understand. A 37, I think, is body temperature. That's around 98-ish.
Yeah.
Mid 98 degrees-ish. I always argue because some people, why isn't the United States on the metric system? Well, we do learn both, and anything scientific, for the most part, is done in metric. Anything that requires, pure broken up by digits and by tens, that's all scientific work is done the world over, no matter where you are with metric. However, I can't verify this. I'm sure I could if I broke out Google right now and looked it up, but there was some sort of issue where the space program, NASA, initially we started building space probes and rockets and everything using imperial, using inches and yards and whatnot. And then once it became more of an international effort, just the headache of converting imperial units to metric became very costly, in the millions of dollars to convert.
Bolts and nuts and key components, of course. I mean, if you're out by like a millimeter, that can be a huge catastrophic situation happening.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And what the other thing is then in New Zealand, because we're an agricultural country for a lot, it was our second biggest. Number one is tourism, number two being agriculture and food production. We would get equipment from both imperial and metric designed countries.
Yeah.
So you'd have I need a metric size bolt for this one, but then you'd need an imperial size for another machine, and you'd have both. You have to have socket sets for both.
Yeah.
For all the different, like my dad had like an imperial set and a metric set of everything because we had both coming in.
We could, geek out about that for hours, different standards. I want to talk more about your story, what you're doing. And for those of you who haven't caught on yet, maybe we haven't mentioned it thus far in the conversation. While you are from New Zealand, you are currently in Japan. What are you doing in Japan?
I'm an English teacher, surprisingly, but I've been here for coming up 9 years this August, so 8.5 years at the moment I've been living in Japan. I live down in Kyushu, which is southern Japan, and it's very warm here and basically all the time. The winter here is very mild where I am, which is lucky if you don't like the cold. But yeah, I came here on the government program, did 5 years working as an ALT, an assistant language teacher. And then I had to finish that job, unfortunately. It was a 5-year maximum on the government program, so they can bring more foreigners into the country to teach.
Is that the Japanese government program?
Yes, it's run by the Japanese government in cooperation with basically every other country that speaks English. American, British, Australian, English. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the primary group that you teach? What's the age range there?
I mainly work in a junior high now. That's basically where I've done most of my work, is teaching at a junior high level, which is, there's 3 years of junior high here in Japan. So from ages 11 to 15-ish.
Okay. How much English do they know by the time they get to you?
The standard has improved over the time I've been here. It used to be they couldn't do anything or identify any letters or numbers or colors. Now they can generally, when they start, read and sort of write the alphabet, tell you colors, tell you my name is, some simple greetings, and that's about it. But as we progress through the years here, you get them doing sentences, different tenses, present tense, past tense, grammar, that sort of thing. And there's lots of cultural stuff you can throw in as well, like American and New Zealand holidays and things like that too.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll leave the conversation with Dave there until the next segment. It's actually funny that I think about it. There was a time in my life where I dabbled with the idea of going to Japan and not speaking English. Of course, I'd go and speak English, but going there to teach English. It was a fleeting thought, but I always wondered what could have been if I had moved to Japan and taught English. Anyways, more Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I am, of course, your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. I've been talking to my friend Dave, and in this segment, we talk more about the fascinating nuances of the Japanese language, but also what it's like to live in Japan and what adjustments had to be made. Let's continue the conversation.
But for middle school age children, what would you say is the most difficult concept for them to grasp when learning English?
I would say verbs, specifically going from different tenses. In Japan, in Japanese language, the way you change a verb is you change the ending, but the ending is pretty much universal. There are very few irregular verbs in Japanese language. But if you go into English, like eat, and then its past form is ate, for example. But like half of the words are ed, but then you have like come and came, run and ran, swim and swam, and they will just get really confused with that concept. The other one that they really struggle with is in English, you need to say I about every sentence. So my name is, I am from, I like, I do. Whereas they would say it once at the start of the sentence, and then from then on the subject is assumed until they change the subject of the sentence. So for example, let's say my name is Yuki, 15 years old, junior high school student, like coffee. Whereas in English, you'd say, my name is David, I'm a junior high school teacher, I like coffee, I play soccer.
Is that a standard to Japanese, or is that informal?
No, that is standard Japanese. You'll say the subject at the start, and then until the subject changes to like you or another person, it'll just be assumed.
That's so fascinating. I've heard that Japanese is one of the most difficult languages to learn, but I'm thinking that as an American who's grown up speaking English my whole life, because I've heard people who've learned English saying that English is almost impossible to learn because of all the variables and all the different aspects of the language, and what you just talked about, the subjects having to establish a subject for every sentence basically, and prepositions and everything. And then you have words like ate, past tense of eat, but it all uses the same letters, eat and ate, and that would just throw people off. And then goose and geese, and it's so. Here's a good example. What's the plural for mouse? Mice. It's not.
But they'll say mouses.
Mouses. That's not right. And that, I would imagine, if I was learning English again, that would make me want to pull my rapidly thinning hair out.
Yeah, you see kids that go, why do you do it this way? And you have to say, I'm sorry, that's just how it is. There are some rules that you learn as you teach. Somebody once told me the person who knows the most about a language is the person who has to teach it, and that is so true. Why do we have to change Y to IE when we say studied?
Yeah.
But when we do played, we just leave the Y, and you got to think about it and work out how to say that.
Is there any hodgepodge in Japanese of other languages around the region that they've kind of incorporated into the Japanese language?
There are quite a few loan words that you hear. For example, they've taken English words and convert them into Japanese meaning. For example, if I said to you, I live in a mansion, you would think I live in a very large, opulent house, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. In Japan, that means I live in an apartment building.
Interesting. The word mansion, the one-off word mansion means apartment building.
Yes.
So basically a living structure with many, many, many rooms, I guess.
Yes, but it's a completely different meaning depending on what country you're speaking. Also, the Japanese word for bread is pan from French.
Huh. What was it before it was pan? How was it described, or do you know?
I have absolutely no idea, but I will say, how do you say bread in English? And they'll say pan. I'll say, no, that's from French. You say bread. And they're like, what? And they'll look at me like, but that's a foreign language word because it's written in the foreign language alphabet. They have a specific alphabet for foreign language words. And pan, the word, is written in katakana, this foreign language, like dialect lettering.
Yeah.
And they'll go, so that's the word in English. I'm like, no, it's not. And you'll have things like they will shorten lots of random words as well, like air conditioner becomes aircon.
Yeah.
Personal computer becomes pasocon.
I
if you like Nintendo, family computer became Famicom.
That's right. That's exactly right. You, as a New Zealander, I almost said Kiwi, but I didn't want to insult you.
Oh, absolutely not. Kiwi is absolutely fine.
Okay, good. You, as a Kiwi, what did you notice in Japan as being the biggest culture shock to you, biggest thing to adjust to?
Probably the weirdest one for me is because New Zealand is a very large country with a very small population, comparatively speaking. Yeah. So you can get in your car and drive for 15 minutes and be in a field where there's nobody around at all. But coming to Japan, you go anywhere, there will be somebody else.
Wow.
Like you can drive to the top of a mountain or climb to the top of a mountain. There will probably be at least one other person at that top of the mountain with you. You can never really be alone. And that took a lot of time to adjust to because I was like, I just really want to be by myself. Yeah. But the only place I could really be by myself was in like my apartment.
Yeah. Are the walls pretty thin, or are they pretty well insulated?
Depends on the building. Where I am now is pretty good, but my first apartment when I moved here, I once had my TV too loud and the neighbors banged on the floor, their ceiling with a broom handle to get me to turn it down.
I've never been to Japan. I know Tokyo, is it not the most densely populated city in the world? Is that accurate?
Yes, that is. It's a very, very claustrophobic place. I can do maybe 3 days there before I need to get out.
Yeah, that's weird. I mean, I would say, again, I've never been to Japan, but you know, in there's a lot of people in Houston. There's 6-7 million people around here, but it's still Texas, And like you said, you can drive out. I can drive 30 minutes away from where I am right now and be in the middle of a field, even despite being in one of the biggest cities in the United States. So I think I would share a similar kind of shock that personal time and personal space is at a premium. What's interesting to me, and maybe you can comment on this, I'm sure you can, is since Japan is so densely populated, courtesy and manners seem to be extremely important. So describe to me what riding on an average railway car or subway car is like in Japan.
It depends where you are. Where I am out in the countryside, there's only one railway line and it's nowhere near my house. But in my experiences, like people will wait in an orderly line as the train rolls in. People will wait for those inside to exit before entering. There are specific seats that are dedicated for those with small children or the elderly or people with injuries, and they get priority in those seats, so people won't sit there, and make sure there's space for people to move to them easily as they enter the train. But it's a real culture of consideration as much as they can, minus, of course, you've seen the videos of people getting shoved into subways in Tokyo during rush hour, I'm sure.
Like the officials, the subway officials, like cram them in there.
They will pay you to push people into the subway, which I think would be an interesting job.
It's such a dichotomy to me. That's a good word, where you have just the most insanely dense populations with some of the best manners and considerations for others. But I guess that's kind of part and parcel when you're living so close with people all the time. It's better that way. Yeah. Otherwise, it'd be complete chaos.
Yeah, there's a really big thing in Japan about preserving the peace in a situation. So people will go, oh, well, this is just how it is. It's only 20 minutes down until I get off at this station. I mean, this is how it is. Otherwise, I would be late to work.
Yeah.
And people are very tolerant and will generally try to help each other. They actually teach this in school. In elementary schools in Japan, there is a moral education class, which goes into things like being considerate of others and making sure that if you found like a wallet in the street, that you take it to the police station and hand it in. And all of these sort of things that they have a specific class just to teach basically how to be a good member of society, like being polite to people who are older than you, making space for those who need it, looking after each other, and treating everybody equally. It's a really big part of the culture because you have to do that. If they didn't, it would be anarchy.
So we'll pause the conversation there, but yeah, etiquette school still very much so being a thing in Japan. I seem to remember a while back, way before my time, that there was etiquette schools in the United States, especially here in the South. I was born in 1983, so I never obviously attended any sort of Southern charm or etiquette school, but it was a thing here in the States. Does anybody still teach etiquette here in the United States? Probably not. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. We'll continue the conversation with my friend Dave, who is from New Zealand but lives in Japan and teaches English. We'll continue the conversation in about exactly a minute or so. But I wanted to bring to your attention, if you're not aware of this already, but Bill Gates has further distanced himself from Microsoft. That sounds wrong. There's nothing malicious going on there. He just steps down as a chairman of the board from Microsoft. This terminates his 45 years history with Microsoft, a company that he co-founded in 1975. The reason why he's stepping down as chairman is so he can devote more time to philanthropic endeavors through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The only reason I bring that up is there's some call in this country, it seems, that we want to just basically go after all the billionaires, evil billionaires. All billionaires are evil. Well, then you have people like Bill Gates who do more good in this world than we will ever do in a 10,000-year lifetime. I just wanted to bring that up. Bill Gates, further removing himself from Microsoft to pursue philanthropic endeavors. Anyways, let's continue the conversation with Dave in Japan.
To change the subject a little bit, who knows what we might come back to, but like I say on my show, we're all geeks about something. So when you're not teaching English, I assume that you're already a geek about teaching English, which is wonderful. Our job can be our geek thing. I love doing radio. It's a big geek thing to me. But in your downtime, when you do get time to yourself to tinker with something or to devote to another pastime, what are you into?
I am into retro games in a very large way.
I think you're in a good place for that, probably.
Oh, yes. So I collect specifically Nintendo. I'm a big Nintendo old 8-bit, 16-bit cartridge collector. Game Boy, everything. I recently did a quick tally of my collection. I have over 500 games in my collection at this stage.
Nice.
My wife is very happy about that.
Yeah. Do you have it in Japan with you?
Yes, I do. I had a collection in New Zealand, but when I moved here, I sold it.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So I started over again, and in the 8 years I've been here, I've managed to acquire a lot of systems and games. One of the things I like to do is we have this specific recycle shop chain called Hard Off, and they have this fantastically big section called the junk section. And Johnny, I know you would love the junk section.
Yes.
You go in and you find things, and they're like, yeah, this isn't working, so we're going to sell it to you for basically nothing. So you can find it, and if you know how to do some basic repairs on it, you can get yourself a really good deal. So I will go and buy broken Nintendo 64s, broken Super Famicons, things like that, take them home, put a new fuse in, change the transistor, and repair it, and then sell it to continue to fund my gaming collection.
That is brilliant. And you get the joy and satisfaction of fixing something.
Yes, and also then it doesn't stay in the house, which keeps the wife very happy.
Oh, you know what? I think your wife and my wife would have a lot in common. I see, we kind of see our collections through rose-colored glasses, or maybe denial, in that it's not that big. It fits all in this one space. It's in reasonable order, so I don't see what the problem is. So it's not that I want every old bit of gear, old bit of kit, depending on however you describe it, wherever you are in the world, but I do want at least one good working example of it. Not to continue running on here, but my ultimate dream as far as cassettes, because if you've been listening, I've been geeking out about cassette tapes and reel-to-reels and stuff like that. I would love a Nakamichi cassette deck, and then I'd just be done with cassette decks, because I'd have the best cassette deck. So can you relate to that somewhat? Is it about having absolutely everything, or is it more about having one of everything?
I'm more of the one of everything, and also when it comes to particularly like Nintendo systems in Japan, Nintendo was number one for everything here. So you could go and buy one of every game, but you'd have thousands of cartridges for one system. So what I go for is more of a curated kind of style where I'll collect like all the games in a series. Like I have all of the Mega Man games, for example. They're called Rockman here in Japan, but I have all of those. Like I will buy sets and mini collections of things rather than I have all of the officially released cartridges, because that is an impossible goal. And I had to kind of realize that. And also, given Japan is a country that is very, very much about efficient use of space, I've had to kind of be thinking about, do I really need this copy of Tetris when I have 4 other ones already, and things like that. I realized recently I have 5 different versions of Nintendo Baseball, the original baseball game, for different formats. Like I have one on the Famicom disc, one on a regular cartridge, one in a cartridge with a box. I'm like, do I really need this many? So it's kind of like being a bit responsible about the space as well, because if I manage to completely overwhelm the space that I have, I don't have anywhere else to go in terms of storage. So I have to be careful about that.
Do you have the Famicom disk system?
Yes, I do. I have a working unit that I spent 3 hours recalibrating the belt for a couple of years ago.
Oh my goodness. You just triggered something potent in me. You used 2 things. One, calibrating the belt. That's already just geeking out about that. I love tinkering with things like that. Belts you use in all sorts of things. Belts you use in magnetic disc drives, like you just described. Belts you use in tape decks. Belts you use on turntables. All sorts of different things. So you got to work on. Did it need a new belt, or were you able to refurbish the one that was in there?
It needed a new belt. The disc system is notoriously known for using very cheap, low-quality belts, and particularly if you live in a warm climate, they're prone to degradation over time.
So how did you source that belt? Is it is it a standard disk drive in there that you can get belts from anywhere?
It's a specific disk drive, but there are enough of a retro fan base in Japan that you can look on like Yahoo auctions and so. I'm looking for a Famicom disk system belt. You can get one for about $5.
Do you know the capacity per disc? Was it 720 or 144? Or what was it? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It might vary. It might be a little different. It might depend on the game. I don't know.
You'd also have to flip the disc for some of your bigger titles, like Legend of Zelda. You'd have your save file on one side, then flip it to play the game.
That's fascinating. That's true because in the cartridge you had the battery backup. So
yeah, but that wasn't a thing here.
Right. So when you play Zelda, would you have to load it side A first, and then it would ask you flip it, and then it'd ask you to flip it again, or would you flip it save side first and then go into the game, flip it over again?
So you would load one side, and it would be the main game. It would come in and go, okay, start and go, okay, please flip to slide B. Flip to slide B. It would load up your save games. You'd choose your save file. It would grab that data and load it into the RAM of the system because it comes with a RAM adapter to hold the data.
Yeah.
And then they'd say flip again, and you'd flip it back to the main game, and then it would continue with your save data mixed with that game data to continue the game because the Famicom disk was created in relation to the chip shortage of the 80s.
Yeah.
No, that's what it came out for. They made the disk system because producing cartridges with larger and larger chips was becoming economically unviable.
Yeah.
But then once the price of chips dropped again, that's why the disk system was never released in America, because they realized they could just do everything on cartridge for about the same price without having to deal with disk system belts. And the problem also with the disk system is how easy it is to pirate for.
Ooh, yeah, that's true. Was that a big deal back then?
Oh yeah. There were multiple programs written specifically for copying discs, and you could rewrite a disc at a convenience store. You'd take it and go, I want this game, and they would write it for you. But of course, if you could do that at home and get a copy from your friend without having to pay for it, well, I mean,
yeah,
why wouldn't you? Back then, it was the 80s, the games are expensive.
That's right. Don't copy that floppy.
Yeah, that was not obviously a thing here in Japan so much.
The Commodore 64 existed at the same time as the Nintendo Famicom in the disk system. So do you have it, or do you know anything about, I think there was a keyboard in BASIC that you could use on a Famicom?
Yeah, I have that.
Oh!
That's so cool. They made a keyboard add-on for it, but they released BASIC on a cartridge, and this cartridge had a slot in the back for putting like AAA batteries, and that would keep your file in memory.
Wow.
And they made not only one version, they actually made a couple of different versions of BASIC. Like they had a version 1, then a version 2, then a version 3. I have a version 1 that came with my keyboard, and I have a version 3 as well. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get the documentation, the original, but you can find it online pretty easily. But yes, there is programmable BASIC on the Famicom. You had to buy the keyboard, which came with the BASIC cartridge, and then if you wanted to get a newer version of BASIC, you would just buy an upgradable cartridge.
Man, is the keyboard, was it? What did that look like? Was it? What was the layout?
It's pretty similar to a standard QWERTY, but underneath the Roman letters, there'd be Japanese symbols and things, and there's a bunch of function keys at the top. It looks sort of similar, the layout, I would say, to a Commodore 64, honestly.
Mm-hmm. That would make sense.
In terms of function buttons and things. But in terms of, and it's like it's twice the size of the system itself. Obviously, it has to be wider, but it's also very thick. Yeah. It's quite a chunky boy.
Chunky boy. That's right.
Part of me misses when technology was chonky, because chonky meant easier to repair. Try to repair your smartphone now versus trying to repair a tape deck from 1975. It's a little bit easier, although still difficult, to repair old technology, and I kind of miss that. I mean, there's pros and cons to both, but anyways, don't miss me in the break. We'll be right back with more Geek Therapy Radio. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, reminding you that you can find the podcast in your favorite podcast player. Just search for Geek Therapy Radio and look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and that's me. All right, so continuing the conversation with Dave, who is a New Zealander who lives in Japan and teaches English. I bet you didn't know the old Nintendo, the Famicom in Japan, was capable of so much. Let's continue the conversation.
The other really interesting thing was that they had a modem for the Famicom, believe it or not.
Okay.
So you could do things like the one thing that they did that was, I think, an interesting thing was the Famicom became so ubiquitous, basically every house had one. Mm-hmm. You could do horse race betting on your Famicom at home.
Wow. Official, like for money, gambling.
Yep.
Have you seen what the Nintendo PlayStation has gone for at auction?
Yes. I was surprised at how low it went, honestly. I thought it would go a lot higher than it did.
Higher than 360K?
Yeah, well, I mean, the guy had said that he'd had an offer of 1.2 mil from somebody at some point.
Right. And he held out thinking that he could get more at auction. And I still maintain that for the buyer's sake, that they don't unearth a new one. They don't find another one anytime soon because...
I keep looking.
Yeah.
I live out in the middle of nowhere. There's a bunch of really far-flung mom-and-pop recycle shops that you just find some crazy deals at because they don't know what they have.
Right.
My biggest find, speaking of that, I got a hotel-size NES system. It had like 12 games. You could choose the categories and everything. Cool. And I walked in and said, how much? And they said, oh, I don't know. They called down and said, I got this old Famicom thing. And they're like, oh, 1,000 yen, so like $20.
What?
It was a giant steel case with 10 cartridges in it of like 8-bit games, and you'd select your game, you could play it.
Yeah.
And it had the zapper and 2 controllers, and I got it for 1,000 yen. I took it home, cleaned it up, sold it for 10 times what I paid for.
Awesome.
I mean, it was great, but it was a giant steel box. I could literally... the guy paid, I think, almost half again in shipping to get it to him. In Japan, I sold it locally. I didn't want to sell it internationally. That would have been horrific.
Yeah.
But it was built to last. It was built to be in a hotel where people would be kind of rough on stuff. But this thing I found in a far-flung recycle shop, like an hour or so drive from where I live. And I got it for next to nothing because they didn't know what they have. And that seems to have been what happens when they find these systems. Like the PlayStation was found in somebody's attic and bought for like 75 at a yard, like an estate sale. Uh-huh. So those sort of things seem to pop up. So I always keep my eyes open because you never know. I might randomly stumble across one. I came across a Model 1 Famicom that they recalled.
Nice.
So it makes it very rare. I came across one at a local recycle shop for $4.
Yeah.
Picked it up, took it home. It's in my collection now. I'm not selling that one. The way you can tell is the buttons are square, not round.
That
Droller
is cool. That is so cool. Yeah, I wouldn't sell that either. That would definitely stay in the personal collection. I always keep my eyes out for stuff like that. Once in a while. I don't go often enough. I'm not telling you to go down there and scour, but if you're just passing by and you see a good cassette deck and it says Nakamichi on it, especially if it says Dragon on it or something like that, because a Nakamichi Dragon is like the holy grail of decks. But yeah, if you're in there and you see it in the corner somewhere, whether it's working or not, yeah, shoot me an email. That'd be awesome.
No problem, man. I got your back. I'm always on the hunt for a couple of different people. I've got a bunch of retro collectors in New Zealand that are always like, hey, if you see XYZ, let me know. And I have a list of things to keep an eye out for people. I usually hit the recycle shops every couple of weeks.
Yeah. So
no problem.
Yeah, right. So here's a question that popped in my mind. Do you drive in Japan? Does New Zealand drive on the left too?
Yes, New Zealand drives on the same side as Japan, so that was very easy. My transfer is literally show up, do an eye test. But I think my first 2 years, I got a lot of demerit points for really obvious stuff now that I just didn't think about. I got caught speeding once because I was going New Zealand speed limit in Japan, and it's different. But that was actually really interesting because I was a government employee. I had to go and report to my boss that I had been caught speeding. So I rock up and I talked to my supervisor and he went, oh yeah, okay, we got to go talk to the boss. And we went and talked to the boss. My boss was the most easygoing older guy I've ever met. And they knew that I didn't have a very nice car. I just moved to Japan. I needed a car to go to work because most of the schools aren't near the train lines where I grew up.
Did you have a key car?
Sorry, where I'm working.
Did you have a key car?
A K car, yeah.
Okay, cool.
666 raw cubic centimeters of power.
Yes. I got pulled over in the DeLorean last year, a year and a half.
Really?
Yeah, but my stickers were out, and I thought for sure I'm going to get a ticket, and I wouldn't argue it. I never argue whenever a police officer pulls me over, I don't argue, because obviously they're got me for something, whether I know what that something is yet or not. And I'm all about damage control. Like, this situation situation sucks. Running my mouth is only going to make it make it worse. So I'm just going to comply and do whatever I need to do and just take it, because anything I do is going to make things worse. And if I need to contest it, I can go to court. So anyways, he pulled it over. He's like, honestly, I just wanted a closer look at it. I was like, well, here it is. And he goes, but your tags are expired. So he's like, where are you headed? This was Halloween Day, actually, is what it was. And me and my wife, who was my fiance at the time, were dressed as Marty and Jennifer, of course. So I said, yes. We're just taking it to the trunk or treat or whatever at church. It's all innocent. He's like, just make sure that it's really cool. And I loved pulling you over today. It's really cool to see it, but just make sure that, I don't pull you over again for expired tags. I've had cops pace me. I don't drive it every day, only once in a while, but I've had cops pacing me. I'm like, oh crap, I'm going to get pulled over because maybe the tags were expired still. Their partner's just taking pictures with their cell phone. And
that actually reminds me of a story myself.
Yeah, go for it.
It was also around Halloween last year. I was at a red light and I was rear-ended.
Oh no.
So I pull over, the guy pulls over, and I step out in full Ghostbusters regalia.
Is Halloween a thing in Japan?
It is to a point, and as an English teacher, I generally do a couple of lessons over that week dressed in the full costume. Mm-hmm. We're talking overalls, jumpsuit, elbow pads, proton pack that lights up.
Yeah.
Whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
So this young guy behind me, he's like, what's up with the overalls and the Ghostbusters logo? And I pull out my proton pack from the back of the car and go, yeah, it's Halloween. He's like, oh, I am so sorry. And he was really apologetic. And the cops came and had a look, and they had the same reaction, like, what, really? Ghostbusters? That's awesome. Yeah. But it's there seems to be a higher priority if you're in costume of having an accident. I don't know. What's the deal with that?
I don't know. Maybe, who knows what, maybe the person saw you in, I don't know, they're trying to take whatever. It's one of those, what is it, correlation and causation? Yeah. There's not necessarily one causing the other thing, but it does seem that on holidays or unique events, that's why I'm always not apprehensive, but I'm extra cautious in unique circumstances or unique days or going to do a unique thing, because Murphy's Law, technically, people mistake Murphy's Law for saying anything bad that can happen will happen. That's not what Murphy's Law says. Murphy's Law just says anything that can happen will happen.
So unfortunately, what is happening right now is that the broadcast is coming to a conclusion. Thank you so much to my guest, Dave, friend of the show, Dave, for coming on all the way through the miracle of Skype from Japan to talk with me here on Geek Therapy Radio. If you want access to the full unedited conversation, because I have to edit it all down to a 39-minute broadcast here, but Dave and I talked for well over an hour. Grab the podcast, Geek Therapy Radio, in your favorite podcast player. Look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and you'll find information on how you can listen to the full unedited version of our interview there. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to visit my friends at Best Automotive in Kingwood. They'll take care of your classic car. They'll take care of your modern car. They take very good care of me, so I can't say enough about Best Automotive in Kingwood on North Park. Thank you for listening to Geek Therapy Radio this week. Remember that we're all geeks about something, and you are worthy of love, both giving and receiving love, and you are worthy of your own self-respect. So take care. Until next time, thank you so much for geeking out with me.